President, judging by the deafening silence of Senate Republicans, you would think that there was no conservative support in this country for even the most measured response to climate change. However, many prominent Republicans are actually clamoring for climate action. They're just not doing it here in Mammon Hall. See, for example, the January 16th op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. The Wall Street Journal is not exactly a progressive lefty rag. The opening line of the Wall Street Journal op-ed is, "Global climate change is a serious problem calling for immediate national action." End quote. I agree. The op-ed is signed by 27 winners of the Nobel Prize in Economics, 4 former Federal Reserve chairs, 12 past chairs of the President's Council of Economic Advisors, and 2 former Treasury secretaries. Many were appointed by Republican presidents. Let's look at what this bipartisan group of experts and economists is proposing. Here is the first policy recommendation. A carbon tax offers the most cost-effective lever to reduce carbon emissions at the scale and speed that is necessary. By correcting a well-known market failure, a carbon tax will send a powerful price signal that harnesses the invisible hand of the marketplace to steer economic actors towards a low-carbon future. Again, I agree. We must make the price of fossil energy reflect the costs of carbon pollution. That's Econ 101. And we have to do it if we are to reduce emissions as much and as quickly as we need to. This is why Senator Schatz and I introduced the American Opportunity Carbon Fee Act to put a price on carbon. It's not just academic economists and policymakers who recognize that putting a price on carbon pollution is the most efficient way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Business executives agree. Few firms are more capitalist and fiercer than the legendary Goldman Sachs. Consider this from Bob Litterman, the former head of risk management at Goldman Sachs, writing recently in the New York Times. For society at large, he writes, and the government in particular, the most important and urgent action required is to minimize future warming by creating appropriate global incentives to reduce carbon dioxide emissions from burning fossil fuels. Economists generally agree that rather than regulate behavior, it is more effective to allow individuals to choose their actions as long as the prices appropriately reflect the costs. Again, back to Econ 101, including, he says, risks posed by climate change. To date, he continues, prices of energy have not reflected the risk of future climate changes. This is a stupid mistake. That is not very complicated economic jargon. This is the former head of risk management for one of the smartest and most capitalist firms the planet has ever seen, saying that we are engaged in now is a stupid mistake. Again, I agree. Republicans typically support free market solutions, and this is a free market solution. Yet still, there remains that deafening silence from the other side of the aisle here in the Senate. Here is the second recommendation from The Economist's op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. A carbon tax should increase every year until emissions reductions goals are met and be revenue neutral, revenue neutral to avoid debates over the size of government. A consistently rising carbon price will encourage technical innovation and large-scale infrastructure development. Two things we want, innovation and infrastructure. So again, I agree. As to revenue neutral, the carbon pricing system Senator Schatz and I proposed is revenue neutral. Every penny goes back into the pockets of Americans. None is designed to make more or bigger government. As to innovation, a carbon fee levels the playing field so that polluters have to compete in the market on even terms with non-polluters. Competition on a level playing field will incentivize innovation in renewable energy, innovation in energy efficiency, innovation in resilient infrastructure, innovation in low-carbon manufacturing and transportation. This is not a novel concept. Nobel Prize-winning economist Richard Nordhaus showed as far back as 1992 that a low tax on carbon set to rise slowly over time could be enough to keep emissions at reasonable levels, saving us from climate change at little, if any, cost. The tax would promote innovations in new forms of power generation and eventually a widespread adoption of clean energy technologies. The latest Republican claim is that innovation is the solution to climate change. Fine, but you're not going to get adequate innovation on the tilted playing field that the fossil fuel industry protects. Carbon pricing uses market forces to drive innovation. What else do the economists recommend? A border carbon adjustment system should be established. This system would enhance the competitiveness of American firms that are more energy efficient than their global competitors. It would also create an incentive for other nations to adopt similar carbon pricing. Again, I agree. A border carbon adjustment system means that products from countries without a carbon price are subject to a harmonizing tariff so that they don't have an unfair advantage over domestic products. This protects American manufacturers and, in turn, American jobs. And it motivates other countries to help solve this global problem. People who say we need a global solution must look to a carbon price because it is the most efficient global solution. And that is why the White House Schatz bill includes just such a border adjustment system. By the way, we filed this bill 3 Congresses ago first, so we've been at this for a while. The Economist Wall Street Journal op-ed was just a few weeks ago, so we seem to have some convergence here. The economists continue to maximize the fairness and political viability of a rising carbon tax. All the revenue should be returned directly to U.S. citizens through equal lump sum rebates. The majority of American families, including the most vulnerable, will benefit financially. Let me repeat that again, will benefit financially by receiving more in carbon dividends than they pay in increased energy prices. The majority of American families, including the most vulnerable, will benefit financially. As I already noted, the White House Schatz plan returns all revenue to the American people. Carbon pricing is not a tax increase. Lower and middle income households actually get more money back than they may pay in higher prices. More than 24 Nobel Prize winners signed this Wall Street Journal op-ed. Their economic expertise is unimpeachable. We have at least one Nobel laureate from almost every year since the late 1990s. There are only a few missing names, and many of those names actually have endorsed carbon pricing in other venues. You might say, okay, well, they're just a bunch of academics. They're all out of touch with political realities. Well, these were all chairs of the Council of Economic Advisors to the President. When you're advising the President of the United States, you generally adopt some sense of political realities. And note that this is a bipartisan list. It includes advisors to 4 Republican presidents and 2 Democratic presidents. When this group of people can agree on an economic policy, you'd better believe it's not some fringe idea. And these experts all say that carbon pricing is a practical solution to a very real and pressing problem. And here is yet another bipartisan list of signers on the Wall Street Journal op-ed: Fed chairs and Treasury secretaries. So we have top-level economic appointees from 5 different Republican presidents, all saying that, and I quote, global climate change is a serious problem calling for immediate national action, end quote, and all saying that setting a carbon price is the best action to take. They don't write very big checks, so they don't get heard very much around here, it seems. But let's think for a minute. What about this president? What about President Trump? What might he say? What might President Trump think about action on climate change? This is an advertisement, a full-page advertisement from the New York Times from 2009. Back in 2009, Donald Trump and his children and the Trump Organization all signed this letter published in the New York Times. This letter urged then-President Obama to pursue what they called meaningful and effective measures to control climate change. And it goes on, if we fail to act now, this being 2009, if we fail to act now, it is scientifically irrefutable. Irrefutable was the word they used. Scientifically irrefutable that there will be catastrophic and irreversible consequences for humanity and our planet. Irrefutable, catastrophic, irreversible. Not much ambiguity there. Well, a decade has passed since this letter, and much has changed. Now, Donald Trump mocks global warming, and the GOP in Congress has fled from taking any serious action on climate change, even on policies that are as mainstream and widely supported by appointees of Republican presidents as carbon pricing. How did this come to pass? Well, I was here. I saw it happen. The year after President Trump signed this letter, the Supreme Court's disastrous Citizens United decision opened the floodgates to unlimited special interest money, money from polluters, into our politics. And that changed everything. In 2007, we had bipartisan climate bills. In 2008, we had bipartisan climate bills. In 2009, we had bipartisan climate bills. Bipartisanship was the theme of responding to the climate change problem for those years. By my recollection, we had 5 different bipartisan Senate climate bills kicking around. January 2010 comes the Citizens United decision. The fossil fuel industry pushed for it, asked for it, saw it coming, and took immediate advantage of it. And before you know it, that unlimited money, often unleashed through dark money channels so you don't know who's behind it, and the threats and promises that necessarily accompany that power. Think about it. If you're given the power to spend unlimited money in politics, do you not necessarily also have the power to threaten to spend unlimited money in politics? Of course you do. The two cannot be separated. And so the unlimited spending, the anonymous dark money, and the threats and promises combined to shut down the Republican Party on this issue. It was like turning off the lights. And from January 2010 forward, no Republican in this chamber has been willing to get onto any serious piece of legislation to reduce carbon dioxide. Republican voters aren't there. Republican young voters are up in arms. Republican economic leaders aren't there. You can look across the Republican Party and you find a strong and solid desire to address the climate problem, and you even have Republican leaders supporting a specific solution. It's just here where it stops. It's just here where political spending is so important that it has been able to overcome even the judgment of Nobel Prize-winning Republican appointees as to how to solve this. After he received his Nobel Prize just last October, Richard Nordhaus, Nobel Prize-winning economist, lamented, "It's hard to be optimistic. We're actually going backward in the United States with the disastrous policies of the Trump administration. Where's 2009 Donald Trump? Where's the guy who signed this? I want that guy back." These economists of all political backgrounds know what's going on, and they know how to fix it. The American people know what's going on, and they want us to fix it. It's time for us to take action, and it is time for us to wake up.